Then George tied the sack tight. Kati crouched, waiting in the field adjacent to the tilled no-man's land at the border crossing. She listened for her husband's boots on the frigid ground. When she heard him approaching, she stepped out of hiding. Ilia set down the sack, and Kati leaned in with a kitchen knife and carefully tore the seam. The child slid out, coated in flour dust, and slumped heavily onto the ground. "Come, we must hurry," Kati urged, shaking the child's shoulders. The girl's eyelids fluttered open as Kati lifted her to her feet. She rocked unevenly on her thin legs and blinked, peering at their faces in the early dawn. She looked frightened, and Kati hastened to hush any outcry, pressing hard fingers over her lips. "Carry her," Ilia whispered. "She's half asleep." He had to return to work. He couldn't be gone long without attracting attention. He took the rake Kati had brought and retraced his exact path, working to erase his tracks. Kati stared down uncertainly at the forlorn child. There was no time to waste. "Come," she said, reaching for her hand, attempting to pull her. The child stumbled forward on rubbery legs. Kati panicked. The sun would be shining before they got home. They should have left her in the sack. Squatting, she took the girl by the arms and hoisted her onto her back. She straightened up carefully, steadying herself under the surprising density. She went as swiftly as she could through the corn and tobacco fields. Dogs began to bark at the farm. Kati hurried, breathing heavy clouds in the cold morning air. Climbing the embankment to the road, she stumbled and fell on one knee. She pushed herself up, gritting her teeth, her back on fire from the child's weight. In the distance, she could see the house silhouetted against the sunrise. She crossed the road, stepping clumsily through an opening in the old sheep fence, and trudged doggedly across the last field, inwardly muttering her paternoster. At last she came to the hedge that bordered the garden wall. "Close your eyes," she whispered to herself, and pushed headlong through the privet, emerging on a small footpath. She groped for the key inside her pocket and fit it into the lock of the wooden door in the wall. The gate swung open. She stumbled in and finally, exhaling, set the child down. The dormant garden was covered in frost. Icicles hung from an arbor. Kati looked at the waif beside her. Her blood was still pumping. She extended her hand, and when the child didn't respond, she took her firmly by the sleeve, up the pathway, into the shadow of the house. Kati struck a match and lit a candle. "Godspeed," she said, turning to the child, her breath evening out now that she was home. "I am Kati." She clasped her hands together nervously and said, "Auntie Kati, your father's sister." She hurried to hang up her coat and, tying on an apron, stoked the fire back to life. She was broad-backed and plainly dressed, her hair pulled back severely. Her face glowed over the coals. "I'm married to Eva Balaj, a Romanian. That is who carried you from the train." She set aside the fire iron and closed the stove. "You're in Crisu now." She helped the child out of her coat, wrinkling her nose. She had soiled herself. Kati shook out the coat and coughed as the flour rose like smoke. She ushered the child across the room to the bath. "I heated the water before setting out for the border," she explained. She lifted the kettles, pouring them into the tub. The child stared with glassy eyes at the steaming water. "It's good and warm," said Kati, shaking the droplets from her fingers. "Go ahead, get undressed." When the girl didn't move, Kati held her breath against the stench and stripped her down. She was terribly thin, small for her age.